The opening sentence is clearly an over-discussed topic when we're comparing novels to each other, and this precisely is testament to the importance of a good opening sentence in establishing a good novel. This video is going to be a compilation of most of the good opening sentences that I really enjoyed from the books that I read, and the books that they're drawn from are primarily also the books that I really enjoyed overall themselves. As a side note, some of the sentences will be possibly two sentences for the purposes of illustrating what is so excellent about them. I wish to note that there is no one formula for what a good opening sentence should be like or what it should do, so that is why I'm structuring this video into different sections, and each section revolves around a certain type of good opening sentence. There is practically no debate over this point. One of the most effective types of opening sentences is one that thrusts you in the midst of uncertainty. It raises multiple questions for the reader as he is thrown in the middle of a situation that carries a lot of things to be explained, and that is what drives the reader forth in the book. My mom died today, or yesterday maybe, I don't know. I would say that death is probably one of the most effective openers to throw the reader into a situation that triggers not only their curiosity but their emotional involvement. This is because death is such a grave thing in pretty much any person's lives, and it raises questions such as, how did the person die? And what implications does this death have for the storyline? This second sentence of Camus' opening in particular is a powerful tool to characterize Meursault's numb, indifferent attitude towards life. And this sort of attitude is central to the absurdist philosophy that Camus wants to portray throughout the book. The best thing would be to write down everything that happens from day to day. Something has happened to me, I can't doubt that anymore. So there are two sentences for this case because the novel is structured in a diary form. The first sentence is taken from a sort of prologue-like section titled Undated Sheet, and the second is from the actual opening of his diary. So the first sentence raises a crucial question of why. Why is it important for the protagonist Requentin to do so, to write down things? Sartre, in fact, proceeds to answer this question throughout the book, and the answer lies in Requentin's mental condition. That is, that he falls into a sort of existential despair, and that is the center of Sartre's philosophy of existentialism. The second sentence here works precisely to answer the theme of the section, which is it throws the reader into a situation of uncertainty, and the reader is driven to read the book by the question, so what exactly has happened? When Gregor Samsa awoke one morning from troubled dreams, he found himself changed into a monstrous cockroach in his bed. There's very little that needs or can be said about this one. It is literally one of the most iconic literary openings. The fact that someone turns into a cockroach one morning is no ordinary occurrence, and especially the fact that it's thrown at the opening of the book would certainly raise a lot of questions. Last night I dreamed I went to Manderley again. So what is central in this quote is Manderley, and it's an estate that bears great physical and symbolic and emotional significance in the novel. And by putting this estate in the opening sentence, it is immediately drawn to the reader's attention. Given the retrospective framing of this novel, I was only able to fully appreciate the significance of this sentence after I finished the novel. I mean, to avoid spoiling the plot, I would just say it rings a strong sense of nostalgia and emotional loss if you read the opening after finishing the book, and I do recommend that you do that, and that is only when you're fully able to appreciate the emotional impact. It seems increasingly likely that I really will undertake the expedition that has been preoccupying my imagination now for some days. So again, we're thrust in the middle of a situation that has not been fully explained. The reader must be curious to find out what this expedition is and why it's occupied the narrator for a few days. When some character is central to the plot and the message of the book in entirety, an effective opening line would be to establish this character immediately. It gets the reader intrigued about the central character that the story evolves around. My good sir, I wonder if I might venture to offer you some help. I would admit that this isn't a very eye-catching or famous opening, but I included it here because of its uniqueness in immediately thrusting the reader into the perspective of the novel, which is second person, and not a lot of novels are written in second person. It draws the reader in because you feel as if you're immediately thrust, like literally placed in front of the narrating character because you're being addressed immediately. And the tone of the speaker can also reveal much about the central character that the novel is to be around. I am a sick man. I am a spiteful man. I am an unattractive man. I would say this is one of my favorite sentences in framing characterization because immediately we're led to understand the underground man's low self-esteem, and this subsequently reveals insight into his personality. And I would like to make a side note that I read from a scholarly article. So in English, all the three sentences are in the same sort of structure. So I am, I am, I am. But in Russian, like, it's actually grammatically acceptable to say I and then the predicate. Or you could put the predicate first and then put I. And in fact, in Russian, Dostoevsky does alter the order of presentation of those three sentences, which I think creates a different sort of impression on the Russian reader that we're not really accessible to. By putting I at the end of like the third sentence, for example, it does have a sort of emphatic impact. And I think this opening is extremely effective because, in a sense, this book is about his first-person rants. Like, the majority of the book is literally him just ranting. So we have to be very intimately acquainted with the character, and in the very opening, he's being so raw with us in his self-deprecation. I have just returned from a visit to my landlord, the solitary neighbour that I shall be troubled with. So the effect of this quote can be said to be quite self-evident. The central character, Heathcliff, is immediately introduced and characterized as solitary and a neighbor who's not pleasant to deal with. It raises questions such as why he is such a difficult neighbor, what has he done, and what will he do throughout the book. This book contains the records left us by a man whom, according to the expression he often used himself, we call the Steppenwolf. For madmen only, the day had gone by just as days go by. So the story is structured in different parts. The first sentence is taken from a prologue by an unnamed narrator. The second two are taken from Harry's notes. So for madmen only is the heading of the notes, and then we have the first sentence. Again, this opening introduces the central character immediately. It also introduces him by the name that he calls himself, Steppenwolf, which is also known the title of the book. So the reader is immediately led to recognize the importance of this term. And in fact, the story goes on to explore aspects of Harry's character which resembles the idea of a lone wolf of the steppes. The heading "For Madmen Only" is also quite eye-catching. This further establishes his personality because we're led to understand that he's really not your ordinary middle-aged man. He's perhaps not completely sane, and the opening line of his notes really establishes his apathetic attitudes towards life. Often the intrigue of some novels lie in the overall fictional world that it has created. In this case, an effective opening would be one that throws the reader into the world immediately. It was a bright cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. Again, this is an absolutely iconic opening. Most people would have focused on the irregularity of the clock striking 13 because, we only have 12 hours on the clock, and this is interpreted as an indicator that you're in an unfamiliar world. But I wish to highlight the importance of the first half of the sentence in combination with this. So the first half of the sentence really throws us into an ordinary setting, and then the second half of the sentence immediately shatters this illusion. This contrast is very powerful, and it is precisely part of Orwell's futuristic vision. He's not merely creating a dystopian world out of thin air or just wild imaginations like the world of Harry Potter. He's creating a world that resembles and is somewhat an extension of our current world, and thus forebodes the idea that we may progress into the world of 1984. Before the curtain. As the manager of the performance sits before the curtain on the boards and looks into the fair, a feeling of profound melancholy comes over him in his survey of the bustling place. The fundamental vision that Thackeray wishes to highlight in his book is the corrupt social climate that infiltrates middle-upper class life in his contemporary society. And I believe this opening quote powerfully conveys it. He is depicting society as a stage, and in fact the structure of the book reflects it because the narrator often intrudes into the story to kind of like comment on the occurrences on stage, so-called. So on the stage, then actors are putting on a bustling performance, but the narrator is able to see through this facade into the underlying lack of sincerity and human affection, which is why he adopts an attitude of melancholy towards it. But, you may say, we asked you to speak about women in fiction. What has that got to do with a room of one's own? This opening line draws the reader's attention to an explicit link between women and fiction, which is the central idea explored in Woolf's essay novel, because she discusses the obstacles that female writers have faced throughout history. The gesture to a room of one's own is a nod to the book's title, as well as setting the ground for the key analogy that Woolf is to drive throughout the book. A lot of novels do open with this type of statement, either to make a general comment about the central themes of the book, or making a statement pertaining to universality which the author wants the book itself to embody. Happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Tolstoy's opening line, of course, is one of the most iconic in literary history. He aims to make a statement of universality, and the reader would be immediately drawn to explore how the book embodies this statement. Indeed, throughout the book, Anna Karenina does really demonstrate how each family is happy and how some families are unhappy. This is the story of what a woman's patience can endure and what a man's resolution can achieve. So I would say this statement carries significant weight in two respects. Firstly, it purports to make a statement of generality about mankind in general. Secondly, it aims to summarize what its central characters are to go through. Immediately, the reader is led to recognize that the story will involve some very serious ordeal that the characters have to go through, and I would say the amazing plot of this book really lives up to its promise. The idea of eternal return is a mysterious one, and Nietzsche has often perplexed other philosophers with it. To think that everything recurs as we once experienced it, and that the recurrence itself recurs ad infinitum. What does this mad myth signify? So this is clearly a quote with mystical and philosophical ringing. It immediately sets the reader's expectation for this book, which is a true expectation because it does involve a lot of philosophical elements and elements of magical realism. In general, opening with a sort of philosophical statement can draw the reader's curiosity into exploring how the book manifests this idea. So this is a rough summary of great opening sentences that really stood out to me from the books that I've read. And I would love to hear some recommendations in the comments of what sentences that you guys have enjoyed. And please don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed my video.